Welcome to the SImple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. I'm your host, Shannon Ables, and whether you're listening on your commute, exercising, working in the garden, or sitting down with a hot cup of tea or a café au lait, thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to this week's episode of the SImple Sophisticate. I want to begin by saying thank you because we have reached the 20th episode already in what seems like the blink of an eye. And I had worked all summer and been planning since last spring to make this podcast a reality. And of course, my goal was to make it a successful podcast. I by no means thought I'd be a perfect broadcaster. I know I had a lot to learn and still have a lot to learn, but it was my intention to make this a weekly program that you could turn into, be inspired for your week, have a few more tools in your arsenal to live your best life, and to walk away inspired, whether it was for how to live well in your day-to-day life, how to dress well, how to live well in your home, to cook something that was delicious but also simple, whatever it was, that was my hope. And I have been overwhelmed by the positive response. I want to just share with you, and I've mentioned a few times on my Twitter feed over the past few months, that we reached as high as number 5 on the self-help best list on iTunes. And that could not have been possible without you, the listeners. At the end of today's episode, I'm going to share with you a few of the reviews that listeners have shared on iTunes, and maybe you are one of them. And I just want to say thank you so much. That feedback is tremendous, as it also allows new listeners to determine if they want to tune in. So thank you. I am overwhelmed with how successful this podcast has become, and I can only hope that it will continue to be a podcast you want to turn into. But before I dive into this week's episode, you may have noticed that my voice is a little different, and I want to apologize as I have been fighting a cold for the last week, and I cannot kick it. I sound worse than I feel. I feel fine. I got up this morning, I went to yoga, I walked my dogs, I was going to beat this doggone cold into submission, and well, it's still hanging on. So forgive my voice. Next week, I will be back to normal, but I am going to broadcast because I have a lot of things I want to share. Today, we are talking about mastering our minds. One of the most fundamental, I believe, skill that we can do to create our best life. I mean, we can go and we can learn how to dress well, we can learn how to eat well, we can go out and get a great job that pays well, but if we don't have a mind that is exercised and trained to think in a way that's productive. It doesn't have to be positive all the time, and we'll talk about that in today's broadcast or podcast, but it needs to be a productive way of using the tools that we're going to talk about today so that the best life can open up to us. If we can do that, then those other things I just mentioned, the clothing, the home, the food, the career, those things just get amplified because they're just accessories. But our mind will determine our true contentment at the heart of everything. And so today I'm going to share with you 10 tools on how to master your mind. And we're going to turn these tools into habits so that you don't have to think about them all the time. They're just a default. So I'm going to begin with a quote by Stuart Smith, who is the author of The Complete Guide to Navy SEAL Fitness. Here we go. Quote, "I am of the personal belief that through tough physical training, proper mindset, and a high level of maturity, that mental toughness is born." End quote. I bring this quote up simply to remind ourselves that mental toughness is something we can all acquire, but it takes practice and attention to it. And this has to be consistent. All right. Keeping that quote in mind. You can find that quote on today's show notes should you want to keep that. For example, I like to keep quotes in a journal somewhere and assess them or look at them when I need a little boost of motivation. What we think has an amazing effect on the reality of our lives. If we believe we are deserving of a particular career path and we set our minds to it, nothing can stand in our way if we refuse to give up. Contrarily, if we believe we don't deserve a partner who respects us, we will allow ourselves to stay in underwhelming relationships. So as you can see, our mind foretells our future. The gift, the beauty is that our mind is under our control. And with purposeful attention, we can create the habit of allowing our minds to be our best asset rather than take us on a wild, hurtful ride. Much like an athlete who filters out everything, but the moment they are on the court, the field, or the course, so can you filter out negative thoughts, doubts, and worries so that you can achieve your desired success and peace of mind. I will admit, I have been someone who has allowed her mind to take control at various times in my life. I have been and still am working on mastering my mind. But without question, I am much improved from that insecure young woman I was a mere decade ago. Because as you will see, it is a constant process, but the process becomes easier as these skills I'm about to share with you become habits. And they can only become habits if you consistently practice them. So it has to be a conscious effort every single day, and it will get easier as you continue forward. Much like habitually assuming the worst, we can shift this mindset on its head with practice and instead cultivate a habit of refraining from assumption, communicating clearly, and letting go until the time arrives for us to know the truth. This is not easy to do because it requires patience, blind faith, and the ability to shut down the negative thinking. But it is possible. It really is. And your mind and your life will be all the better when you claim this power. All right, so the first tool, let's get in there. Let's dive in. Number 1, examine your core beliefs. Believe it or not, we are often the source behind the debilitating thoughts that creep into our minds. Based on our past experiences, whether they were successes or heartbreaks, we believe we know how everything will work out in the future. We want to know. That's human nature. We believe there is a black and a white to life. And while the past did indeed happen, that is the truth, the future can't be predicted entirely. To limit the possibilities of the future can only occur if we let it. Otherwise, the opportunities for the future are actually endless. Today, examine your core beliefs. Do you believe that you're too old to do something? Let that go. Do you believe that no one will accept you because you've made certain missteps in your past? And by missteps, I mean defined by you or those around you. Let that go. Your thoughts of how things, quote, should unfold are getting in the way of the possibilities life wants to unveil to you. Be open to the unexpected. Yes, you can come with experience and knowledge. In fact, it's good if you do. It's best if you do. But stop assuming that you know what will happen, because typically, most often, life isn't black and white. There is a lot of gray. All right, so number 1 is examine your core beliefs. Number 2, don't give up after the first attempt. When we've never pushed past a certain level, whether it be in our fitness classes or learning a new skill or applying for a higher position at work, if we let it, our minds can begin to accept that we can't excel beyond what we've already done. Dismiss this. Dismiss it now. Any athlete who has had a moderate amount of success will tell you, you will not become proficient until you practice repeatedly the results you wish to occur. So you didn't get the job you were seeking on your first or maybe even your second attempt at the interview. Ask for feedback, build your resume, and try again. The first attempt at caramelizing the sugar on your creme brulee resulted in a black top rather than a brown golden top. Try again. We learn by our mistakes, as we've talked about many times here on the blog. And to allow our minds to think otherwise is to let our minds have control. The only way you will be able to build your confidence and thus strengthen your mind into believing you can do something is if you refuse to give up. You have to outsmart your mind. I know that sounds, how does that sound? I mean, that's like impossible. Outsmart my mind. My mind is, you get the idea though. You do though. You have to basically trick your mind into saying, I can do this. And that's when you become the one in control. Most people who try something new without much instruction or any instruction at all produce their worst results. But that is how you learn, and that is just the beginning. Remember, in order to see progress, you must have a starting point that is far from where you will end up. So number 2, don't give up after the first attempt. Number 3 is pretty simple, but it's often something we forget. Number 3, exhibit more gratitude. If you were someone like me, you've woken up in the middle of the night and your mind takes control. Sadly, it seems these early morning or uber late night mind trips lead nowhere positive, as horrible thoughts of doubt, worry, fear dance like crazy through our minds. At first, I thought I was the only one experiencing such moments of self-created terror. But as I shared my experience with others, I realized this is quite common with people. Part of the problem, I realized, is that my mind was controlling me and not the other way around. So 2 things have helped me master this dilemma when it occurs. 1, read a book. Get your mind reading, thinking about something other than what your mind wants to think about. Or 2, begin thinking about all that you are grateful for. Let's look at the latter option, being grateful. When you decide to think about all that is going well in your life, you are taking back control of your mind. You are stopping the fearful worrying and doubt in its tracks and reminding yourself of all that is going well. Whether you are waking up in the middle of the night or find yourself with endless doubts and worries during the middle of your day, when this happens, turn to gratitude. Quickly, what I think you will realize is you have so much that is to be celebrated. Does this mean you can rest on your laurels? Absolutely not. But what it should provide is a reminder that things aren't nearly as bad as your mind might have you believe. So number 3, exhibit more gratitude. Number 4 is use your brain energy productively. Just like any muscle in our body, our brain can become taxed after extended use, and it needs to rest. Once we respect this biological and neurological fact, we can be more selective and should and need to be more selective about what we ask it to internalize and analyze on any given day. Why bog it down with unnecessary worry and fret? I have always found it interesting that when school begins and I am back teaching in the classroom, my creative bursts are less frequent. Having come to understand this fact about myself, I waste no time in writing something down when it pops up because I know it will occur less frequently during the school year. Conversely, during any holiday breaks or during my summer break, my mind is flooded with ideas as it has been freed to focus on fewer things and responsibility. If we use our brains to instead worry about why we didn't get the job or why he didn't call or why our lives aren't going as planned, we waste valuable resources that could be used more productively to actually improve the quality of our lives. So choose to monitor your thoughts and toss the garbage and keep the gems. Your brain will thank you. Trust me. Number 4, use your brain energy productively. And number 5 is to practice this mind mastering regularly. In Dan Harris's recently published book, 10% Happier, he speaks to the beneficial powers of meditation. Now, he doesn't say that meditation will lead to 100% happiness, but he does unearth the potential to improve our happiness by taking time to meditate regularly. Part of the power of meditation is that it asks us to still our minds, or at least recognize when our minds are running free and we are at its mercy. Even if at first we are not able to rein in our minds, the mere ability to recognize when we've lost control is a tremendous step in the right direction to becoming a master of it. Whether you practice yoga, meditation, or simply pay attention to your thoughts and stop them when they are leading you somewhere that is not going to be beneficial, do so regularly. Before long, you will have taken the beast by the tail and charmed it into submission. So number 5, practice regularly. All right, I'm going to take a quick 1-minute intermission and I will return with the remaining 5 tools to mastering your mind. Well, welcome back. The remaining 5 tools I think you will find quite powerful. I hope the first 5 are some things that you think you can implement into your life, but I think these last 5 are pretty impressive. So let's get started. Number 6, think rationally and realistically. To simply say think positively in order to master one's mind is actually counterintuitive, studies have shown. Why? When we choose to be this positive poppy about all things going on in our lives, even during events of turmoil and frustration, we disrespect our feelings and those around us who need us to be sympathetic. Now, by no means am I suggesting cynicism is the path to mastering your mind. Absolutely not. Rather, be able to be aware of what our minds are thinking, recognize when our emotions are getting the better of us, and bring ourselves back to reality. When we can think rationally, even when it would be easy to get angry, thus lash out, or extremely excited, thus make a rash decision, we have mastered our minds. Here's a really helpful exercise shared in this recent book that I've read called The Charisma Myth. When it comes to dealing with negative thoughts about ourselves or anything in our lives, a cognitive scientist named Stephen Hayes suggests that we see each of our thoughts that are negative as graffiti on a wall. In other words, simply because we see or observe one ugly sight with this graffiti doesn't mean the entire city in which it exists is ugly as a whole. So much like your negative thought, simply because you think an unpleasant thought doesn't mean it's a statement of truth about who you are. So number 6 is to really look at your thoughts rationally and realistically. Don't deny them. You don't want to be super positive when something's negative, and you don't want to be super negative when something needs to be celebrated. But be realistic. Number 7 is don't suppress emotions. Similar to what we just talked about in number 6, we don't want to deny what we're really feeling. We want to make sure that we don't bury our emotions entirely. Now, while we need to be rational and realistic, this by no means is to suggest that we should suppress our emotions. Rather, what mastering our minds asks of each of us is to be able to know our minds, to recognize how we are feeling and why, and allow ourselves the ability to step inside these emotions, but in a healthy manner. In other words, we're controlling how we're dealing with the emotions. We're not ignoring them. We're not burying them. We're saying they exist, and we're figuring out why, and then we deal with it in a tactful, helpful, and productive fashion. For example, during a time of grieving, you should absolutely allow yourself to feel the loss that has occurred. To shut this feeling out, to deny this authentic emotion, will only lead to more frustrations down the road. On the other hand, if you are feeling ecstatic about something that is going really well in your life, you should most definitely celebrate it, dance it, raise a glass, and cheer. In each of these situations, we are respecting the emotion and giving it permission to be felt rather than letting the emotion control us. And I'll leave you with this quote for this particular tool. We make the best decisions when we're in control of our emotions rather than vice versa. All right. Number 8 is a quick one, but a good one. I just want to throw it out there at you. Number 8, be patient, delay gratification. This is a true test of whether you do have control of your mind. So the ability to exercise self-control, having self-discipline, is the effect of someone who has mastered their mind. While instant gratification can be tempting, understandably, keeping our goals and our purpose in mind will make it easy to be patient and say no, knowing that what we're working towards, what we're waiting for, will be far better than what in that moment we could ever experience. Number 8, be patient. Number 9 is practice becoming more comfortable with discomfort. Ooh, this is not an easy one, but it is something to know that you don't have to feel comfortable all the time to be happy, and I don't mean that you're going to be uber happy being uncomfortable, but in order to grow and strengthen your mind, you do need to allow yourself to feel a little discomfort from time to time. Part of immature mental strength is that we don't know what we are capable of until we do it. And because we've never done something, we often allow our minds, which crave certainty and control us, it's trying to keep us alive, survival, right? So we allow our mind to talk us out of something that's new and uncertain. The good news is that for the most part, We live in a world with very few threats upon our lives if we use common sense. For example, using seatbelts, locking the door, you get the idea. Which means that we can stretch our comfort zone most likely a lot and a lot more than we realize. For example, if you desire to be someone who is more physically fit, you will have to go out of your comfort zone to take that fitness class, attend that gym, and work on not obsessing about what others are thinking when you arrive or walk through the gym. Again, notice it is our minds that get in our way. Very rarely is it actual events or actions from other people that are causing this discomfort. And again, choosing to step out of our comfort zone must be done repeatedly, not just once, if we're going to make mastering our mind a habit. And each time it will get easier. Each time it will get easier. So number 9, practice becoming comfortable with discomfort. The last tool I'm going to share with you is probably one of my favorites, and I also think it's probably one of the most powerful because not only will it help you master your mind, but it's going to bring a lot more comfort to your life. Number 10 is become self-compassionate. So for all of you self-critics out there that are one of your harshest critics, I think you will find a lot of relief in this one. Olivia Fox Cabane, author of The Charisma Myth, explains that self-compassion is, quote, the warmth we have for ourselves, especially when we are going through a difficult experience, end quote. And the primary way that we can choose to be self-compassionate towards ourselves is how we think about ourselves as we go through experiences that may not be up to our expectations. In other words, we are able to forgive ourselves so that we can move forward. We can tame our inner critic so that we can be productive and not self-destructive. All of this begins with what our thoughts are about ourselves. Once you master your ability to be self-compassionate, Cabane explains that studies have shown such people have greater emotional resilience to daily difficulties and fewer negative reactions to difficult situations. Part of the frustration of life in our modern age, and especially in America, is that we feel that something must be wrong if we are not happy every given moment of our day. And this is just an absurd expectation of life. When we're not feeling this ecstatic satisfaction about our day-to-day lives, we often feel something must be wrong. Notice the word that I've used here, feel. We feel that something should be wrong. The truth is, every single human being has doubts throughout their day. Every single thinking, conscious human being will come across fear that they are not enough, that they aren't where they want to be. And since there are a million different advertisers, businesses, and people in our lives vying for our attention, our dollars, and our time, we are being catered to because they want us to think a certain way of living is the best. And when we think we have not measured up to whatever we have accepted to be the path we must take, our mind starts to beat us up. Don't let this happen. Master your mind. Choose your path. Choose your response, because your response will determine the outcome, which will ultimately determine the success and contentment of your life. Notice that the core of this entire equation is mastering your thoughts rather than allowing your mind to be manipulated, thus allowing it to manipulate you. You can do it, but it must be a conscious effort. And the good news is, if you take the job of exercising your mind regularly, it will become a habit, and you will regularly default to these healthy thoughts, healthy responses, which will lead to a more fulfilling life. That wraps up the 10 tools on how to master your mind. For all of the show notes, for the links to this transcript, go to the blog www.thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast20, and you'll find everything we talked about there, as well as links to the books I mentioned as well. Now, stay tuned for this week's Petit Plaisir, as well as a few of reviews readers have shared on iTunes about the SImple Sophisticate. I'll see you on the other side. This week's Petit Plaisir is a short little book. It's a quick little read. You can read it probably in an afternoon, but it's absolutely delightful. It's called The Jane Austen Rules, and it has to do with a classic guide to modern love. Sinead Murphy is the author behind this book, and it just came out in October, and I just really quickly devoured it over my holiday break this last month. And It pokes fun at the rules book, which I'm like, woohoo, thank you very much. And if you like the rules book, please don't take offense. But they definitely point out some of the, I guess you could say, the holes or the controversies in that book. And she has some fun with it as well, which I love. I mean, she doesn't take herself terribly seriously, but at the same time, she has read her 6 Jane Austen novels. She knows her characters very well. So for anybody out there who knows Jane Austen and her protagonists, you're going to enjoy this book as well. So there are 10 rules. And not only, I mean, they're for finding love, yes. So if you are interested for that reason, absolutely. I mean, that caught my attention. I'll admit that honestly. But it's also just good life advice as well. And it's simple, and it just is a good reminder. There's three of the rules that I want to actually talk about. And the first one is no girlfriends. And at first you're reading this chapter and you're like, wait a second, don't have any girlfriends? What are you talking about? What her point is to not have girlfriends, but to have woman friends. In other words, have mature women who don't need to idly gossip and hear every single detail about your love life. You can confer with them and you can definitely confide in them, but you don't need to be rehashing every single little detail, and then they fan the flames and then things get blown out of proportion and you're stressed and analyzing everything unnecessarily. And she makes a very good point here. And I think to have very good women friends who are mature, have their life together, not that they're perfect and not that they haven't gone through have their own issues, but that they know not to blow things out of proportion. And your love life isn't their entertainment and vice versa. And so that's one of the rules that I found very fascinating. And I love the title, No Girlfriends. You're like, what? But I think that makes a lot of sense. Another one that I think is worth diving into is don't just sit there, say something. In other words, have a thought in your head. Be someone who thinks regularly and reads and is educated. It's not that you are bewitching and beautiful. It's that you have intelligence, that you have something to say. So be able to contribute something of benefit, of value, and speak your mind. Don't just be a puppet, which is obviously a very good attribute as well, if you're looking for someone who respects that. And I think we all are. And then another rule that, again, I'll leave you with this last one, has to do with being independent, which always grabs my attention, is that it's not, here's a quote. The Jane Austen woman demands also the dignity of finding love without losing self-respect. So you want to be respected for who you are, not just being a puzzle piece, and you demand it. And not that you're rude and bossy about it, because that word is used derogatively too many times, but that you do it in how you set your expectations, in what you allow to happen in your life, things like that. So if you're looking for a quick little read in the afternoon or over the weekend for not much money at all, pick up Jane Austen's Rules, a classic guide to modern love, and I think you'll enjoy it. All right, before I wrap up today, I want to share a few of the reviews that readers have placed on the iTunes store regarding the SImple Sophisticate. Let me first begin with one from Marissa Bishop. She says, I love these podcasts. I listen every day for an extra boost of inspiration. Mondays can't come soon enough. And I want to thank Marissa. You've been a tremendous fan, not only of the podcast, but of the blog. And I am very, very appreciative. And there's so many of you out there that are similar to what Marissa has done in her support. And the podcast and the blog would not be where we are today without your support. So thank you for sharing that comment, Marissa. That was a common theme with regards to Mondays. AYF shared, I look forward to Mondays now. I never thought I would say this, but I'm actually looking forward to Mondays now that this podcast exists. So thank you, AYF. I hope your Monday is off to a great start today if you are tuning in. The next one, a New York Francophile, says, I have enjoyed the blog for a long time and wasn't sure what to expect, but I found the podcast relaxing, enjoyable, and thought-provoking. As I listened to the podcast while getting ready for work, it helped reset my mind to focus on what matters most. Very timely and relevant. Thank you, New York Francophile, for sharing those very honest thoughts. And the last one I want to share from you is Jean Marie M. She says, I find them so inspiring and uplifting. They calm and refocus me onto the present, bringing all the beauty surrounding me to light. Thank you. without you, the listeners, this podcast, this blog would not be what it is. And I am indebted and will never be able to fully appreciate or say thank you enough for all of your support. Next week, I will be back with hopefully my regular voice. So thank you for your patience today. I'm going to sign off, but any of the show notes that you're looking for the book, for the other books that I mentioned in today's podcast with regards to mastering your mind can be found on the blog today, www.thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 20. I'm going to go get a hot cup of tea, maybe dive into the bathtub and try to melt this cold away. You have a beautiful week, and I will see you on the blog until next Monday.
Thank you for tuning in to the SImple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. For more ideas and inspiration throughout the week, stop by the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com, or pick up the book, Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, A Modern Woman's Guide. Until next Monday, I'm your host, Shannon Ables. Bonjour!